Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Reckless a Talk, our TTRPG interview show where we sit down with some of our favorite writers, players, GMs, and streamers to get to know a little bit more about what makes them who they are. I am, as always, your host, GM Nathan. I use he, him pronouns, and this week I got to interview TTRPG video essayist, reviewer, writer, and author Aaron Voigt, also known as AA Voigt. Aaron is someone I had till now been kind of like tangentially appreciative of. His video essays and TTRPG reviews are some of my true favorites in this space. He brings so much of himself and his experiences to his work and really engages with games on both mechanical and emotional thematic levels. So I jumped at the chance to get to talk to him about all the ways that he thoughtfully and entertainingly engages with the hobby. We talk about his new book and associated TTRPG Detente for the Ravenous, which I got the absolute pleasure to read through some of before the interview, and which is available right now over on Aaron's itch page. We also touched on keeping stories contained and painful, the impacts of reviewing indie games, when enough is enough, Pope Henry Kissinger releasing Sin Kaiju, exploring complex topics like real-world history and religion in tabletop, and so much more. As always, if you enjoy this episode, please go check out some of our other Reckless a Talk interviews and maybe even our actual play episodes. We have links to the things that Aaron and I talk about in the show notes, including links to Detente for the Ravenous, the book, and Detente for the Ravenous, the TTRPG. Please go check it all out and all of Aaron's great video essays, which include a lot of familiar faces of Reckless a Talk guests from the past. With that, I'll see you next time. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, Nathan.
It's my totally normal, totally natural greeting at the very start of the podcast, where we haven't been chatting. We just got into the phone call at the exact same moment and just started talking.
Yeah, this is completely cold. I've never spoken to you in my life.
I'm already feeling very good about it based off of the energy that we've gotten in these 5 seconds of recording. But hello, welcome to Reckless a Talk.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for being here. Very, very excited to be sitting down to talk to you about all of the different things that you do creatively, TTRPG early, and all that good stuff. First, for those who are unfamiliar with the many things that you do, tabletop role-playing game and fiction-wise, could you please introduce yourself?
So my name is Aaron Voigt. I go by AA Voigt, and you probably, if you know who I am, which you probably don't, but if you do, it's probably because I have a YouTube channel where I do reviews and like video essay style videos on tabletop RPGs, specifically like lesser known indie games. But I also am a game designer. I'm also a writer, which that's kind of why I'm here today, is to talk about a game that I designed off of a book that I wrote. Mm-hmm. I also do podcasts. If y'all like those, it seems like you probably do if you're listening to this. You
are a regular on two or three shows?
So right now it's only one, thankfully.
Got it.
One of the other ones that I used to do, Bible Boys, which is about Christian media, and me and my ex-evangelical friends, we talked about Christian media, and mostly I made them watch bad Christian movies, specifically the God's Not Dead franchise. I still got to see the fifth one. Yeah, that one is on hiatus, mostly because we all got very busy and one of my co-hosts went to Colombia. So he's pretty busy. You got to give it up to him for that. And then the other podcast I do is Mortify the Friendship Quest with my friend Layla, who is a games producer over at Microsoft. They're great and have a lot of great insights on media and storytelling and also game design.
You do a lot of stuff, video essays, thoughtful reviews, game design, all kinds of good things. But that's simply not where the Reckless Talk experience begins. No, we start at that opening kernel of TTRPG-ness and nerdery. So for you, yeah, when did you kind of get introduced to tabletop role-playing games and or, start on your path to nerdery, whatever is kind of the most appropriate beginning to your tale?
Yeah, I usually say that I had a friend when I was a kid who got me into D&D 3.5, and from there, got into D&D and took a break when I found out that D&D wasn't cool. And then it became cool in 2014 and specifically the Adventure Zone. I started listening in 2014, and that really got me back into the hobby. And then I was a D&D guy up until about 2020 when the Itch.io the racial justice bundle came onto Itch.io, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff that's not just D&D.
Indeed.
And then I got into the indie community from there. But I'm remembering now, when I was a kid, my parents got me what was, I didn't realize at the time, but I guess must have been a Pokemon-based tabletop game, like branded and licensed. I remember playing with my dad, and he was like totally not into it. But I remember like describing, it like had prompts to be like, okay, hey, describe this character. Tell me what this character looks like and how this thing is happening. And then like you got little Pokemon, you had to like use counters and moves to like, I remember putting out a fire with my Squirtle. It was weird. I gotta find that. I bet that exists on eBay somewhere, but that might be the first role-playing game I ever played.
Were there also like cards as part of that too?
Yes, like cardboard. Yeah.
I think I also had that.
Oh my God,
is also I think that has also unlocked a deep memory in me where I remember my brother and I think also played again where it's like, well, no, this isn't the card game. This is a Pokemon game. And no, it's not a video game. It's a Pokemon game with cards that you also are playing in like a role-playing game sense. So I actually think I also remember like having a weird starter set of that now. And we definitely need to Google that after we are done talking.
100%. Because like in the 2000s, like for people of our age, that would have been like just a weird game. But now it's like, oh, that's an adventure module. Like,
yes,
we have.
I am looking back and it's like, oh yeah, and they had like, oh, and now there's a random encounter essentially, and like roll on the table to see who pops up. Oh, it's a Pidgey. Yes, absolutely. And now, yeah, I'm gonna have to rethink my own tabletop role playing game origin story to incorporate whatever the fuck that was.
I'm so glad that I'm not the only person who knows what that is.
So in those early days, as you were kind of getting pulled into the hobby, what was interesting to you? What was kind of the pull to get you on board?
I mean, I think it was just that there's just so much new and different stuff. I mean, I really think it comes partly out of a frustration with D&D and being like, there's only, so much that the system is built to do. And then as soon as I got into that bundle and the racial justice bundle is like thousands and thousands of games, it's just enormous. Just seeing I remember reading Grant Howitt's Royal Blood, that like tarot game, and being like, I barely understand what's going on here, but like the fact that it's just like this PDF that has like an entire system for using tarot to tell a story, like that's a wild. I had heard of PBTA and I'd even played like a one session of a PBTA game like once, but like I just didn't realize that there was a whole like thriving community. And just seeing that and being like, oh my God, there's an entire website of people that are just putting up whatever. Like one of my favorite world building games, it's by D.W. O'Boyle, and I can't remember the name. I think it's like Our Gods or something, our Pantheon. But like when I downloaded it, it was just like basically a Word doc, right? A Word doc in a spreadsheet. And just being like, you can just put up bare bones stuff on Itch.io and like expose people to your ideas. And like that, to this day, I still think that there's like some of the coolest stuff is like the least polished and most experimental. Like, and I think that's so cool about the indie scene. It's just like you can just put words out there and people will find them.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking at the itch page. It was D.W. O'Boyle, Our Pantheon.
Yes. OK.
It looks like it was published it has been updated up through 2021. But yeah, it's very basic. There's like MS Paint map logo and all that stuff. But also like, yeah, I'd check that out. Are you someone who enjoys, and maybe I know this based off of the fact that we're talking about a book that has a rich world building and whatnot, but do you consider yourself more a player of games, a runner of games, a designer of games, a world builder, a just kind of misc storyteller? What's your kind of role at the tabletop role-playing game table?
Well, I definitely prefer to run games. I just find it way to be completely honest, I'm a bad player, and I if I'm not like engaged in the story, I will get on my phone or play on Steam, which is a bad habit and you shouldn't do. But like I do love world building, and I think one of my favorite things to do as a GM is like to work player ideas into the narrative and like get their narrative arcs plotted out. I think that's so fun. Like especially if it's like, oh, I want something terrible to happen to my character. I'm like, oh yes, that's excellent. I love to make terrible things happen to your character. Before I was an RPG designer, I was a writer, and I like broadly don't consider myself a very good RPG designer. I've designed a couple at this point, but I think I'm like just okay at it. I think I'm pretty good at writing because I've been writing, creatively in some capacity since 2017. And that's like really why I think it works. Me getting into the indie RPG scene really clicked because I was just able to see the like expression and range of verbs that RPGs allow you to use, which I like designing worlds and histories and telling stories like that. And, just seeing new methods of doing that, I think is so fascinating and cool.
Yeah. We'll get into the, kind of various, very rich worlds that you've, kind of created, again, especially for your book and most recent tabletop role-playing game. But, for you, as the GM, as the, kind of like person who is, taking the knives from your players and saying, yes, thank you, I will stab you in the back with this. Thank you so much. What are the sorts of themes that you enjoy exploring and worlds you enjoy building?
I mean, I think as is clear from what we'll talk about in a second, I really like thinking about imperialism and religion. I think that those are two forces that, like, especially within the last, certainly within the last 1,000 years, but especially within the last like 300 years, have really shaped the face of what the world where we live in looks like today. Like my first, D&D game that I ran over COVID was like basically like a parody of the Left Behind series of novels.
Yep.
Have you read Left Behind?
I have not read them. I have Wikipedia'd the plots of them several times.
The correct way to engage with that franchise, don't ever buy those books. Please steal them if you must read them. But just like going through and seeing how religion is like the perfect vehicle to talk about like apocalyptic, world ending, to set the stakes for your game. Like it's very easy to be like, oh, this prophecy that is being brought about by a religion, is coming true, right? That's why the book of Revelation is so magnetic and powerful, because it does tell a story of great calamity and disaster and triumph and tribulation. That's why, despite the fact that they're poorly written and horrific, the Left Behind novels are so engaging still, because it's just like, yeah, it would be wild if a quarter of the Earth's population just disappeared. Like, what would the impacts of that be? So that's certainly one of them. I'm also greatly influenced by storytellers like Fonda Lee, like Rebecca Kwong, like Austin Walker, who basically never allow a story to end without there being some sort of like heart-wrenching twist, or not even like not twist in the sense of like it's a surprise, but like there is always cost to moving the story along. And like when I run games, I usually try to keep them contained and painful. What a powerful phrase, contained and painful. Oh, yes, please. And just like I think that stories have to have stakes, and for me it's very fun when you're like, hey player, here's a choice you can make, but it's going to hurt you. And that's another reason why I really like indie RPGs over D&D increasingly, is just because D&D is meant to be a heroic game where you either you slay the dragon, right? And as written, there's a lot less like opportunity to be like, yeah, you slay the dragon, and also this terrible thing happens. You have to kind of work that in yourself.
Do you enjoy, and again, this is having consumed a little bit of your media. Are you someone who enjoys apocalyptic, not like settings, but stakes? Do you like the world is going to be messed up or is messed up and needs to be rescued level of stakes in the kind of stories that you tell? Do you like, kind of smaller things in that bigger backdrop, or, kind of where on the dial are you if you can even pin it down?
Yeah, increasingly, it's not that I don't like apocalyptic stories. I think they're certainly interesting, but I think that stories with smaller stakes are much more relatable. It's hard for me to, consider what the ramifications of, a demon invasion, into Earth would be, because like that's not really the reality I live in. But like when I'm thinking of Fondalee's Jade Warrior, Greenbone Saga is the name of the trilogy. But like the first book, like there's like a whole lot of fighting between these two gangs over what is essentially like a restaurant. And like maybe my favorite scene in literature is like this chapter where the restaurant gets taken over by a rival gang, and like, the restaurateur who runs the restaurant has to like appease this gangster who's, from a clan that he doesn't owe his loyalty to. And he is faced with the choice of like watching his whole staff get massacred, or being like, well, I guess I have to serve this guy my famous crispy squid balls. Yep. And like, I think that's a much more interesting stakes, just to be like, okay, what would you do if something bad happened at your place of work and it put you in a really nasty situation? Like, I think that makes more sense and is a little bit more easy to understand. And I'm tending to try to narrow the scope of some of my stories these days, although Detente is not necessarily that.
I would say it's a little of both. It's a little of both. We've talked a little bit about, kind of you engaging with tabletop role playing games and stories generally. But again, you do a lot of stuff, video essays, design, that sort of deal. But where did you first get into making things for truly public consumption, both inside and outside of the tabletop space?
I guess it would probably have been around 2021 when I like really started, trying to get into the indie scene, because I had read a bunch of like really fascinating world building games in that racial justice bundle. And I was like, okay, I want to try to make my own world building game. I had learned about the Quiet Year. I had seen some world building games on Friends of the Table and Adventure Zone, but I just started thinking of trying to imagine what a game would look like if you used it as a tool, not even really a game, but like a tool to help develop or insert into an existing campaign. And it turned out to be called Craft a King, and it's basically you take some prompts and you trade turns with your fellow people at the table, and you are like, okay, using this word, how do you describe this king or whatever antagonist you want to face in your RPG. And it's also very simple. I think I did some photoshopping of a picture I found on Unsplash or something, and then the rest of the game is just a Word doc. It's very bare bones. But yeah, that's Craft a King. That was my first attempt. I went for a couple walks in the like little forest outside my apartment during grad school. A lot of this also happens during grad school, and I'm very depressed in grad school, and maybe that's why I needed to do something.
Grad school, COVID, a lot going on.
Yeah.
So, and then when you were designing that, when you were taking in these world building ideas and putting together kind of a system of your own, was there always an assumption for you that like, oh, and I'm going to put this out into the world? Like, itch exists. I am aware of that due to the bundle. And hey, I'm noodling around with these ideas and I think I should put this out. Or is that something you had to come around to? Or kind of what was your relationship with it, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was no question that I wanted it to be out in the world. I mean, if I'm being completely 100% honest, I make things for other people to engage with them. Like, I think creators really should try to straddle the line between, making something to make people happy and making stuff, personally for themselves. And like, I personally, I always want to, make something that I am interested in, because at the end of the day, I will spend more time with my book or my game than anybody else who engages with it. That's just how life works. But I gotta be so real. I want people to read my book. I want people to play my games. There's a part of me that needs that validation. I mean, I don't think that's uncommon sentiment to be like, I love making stuff for me, but I do want other people to see my cool shit.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm on social media. It's not just for fun. It is because I want people to otherwise engage with our stuff. So makes plenty of sense to me. So how did designing that kind of first thing, looking either in the moment or now looking back, like what was that experience like? Because you had been doing some amount of fiction writing previously.
Yeah. So I wrote my first, if you know me from Tumblr, my Tumblr username is Monster Factory Fanfic, and that. What did you write there? Well, believe it or not, Nathan, I got my creative writing start doing fan fiction for the Polygon YouTube series Monster Factory. I tried to do like a Final Pam goes through Dante's Inferno sort of deal.
Love it. Hell yeah, I'm on board.
I didn't get super far into it, but I'm
going to go ahead and pause our interview there. I got to go Google some unrelated things to this interview, and we'll come back.
It's still on AO3, I bet. So that's out there. But then I really started trying to this also comes at a time where I'm finishing up my undergrad and being like, no one's going to care about my GPA anymore. Yeah. I guess I have to find other ways to give my life value.
Yeah. How can I measure myself based off of others' expectations if there's not numbers and letters assigned to it? What the hell?
I don't like that. That's why I went back to grad school, obviously. But yeah, no, just trying to find something that made, me feel meaningful and happy and fulfilled. So that's how I start writing again. I start writing a novella in 2017. It's not very good because it's the first thing I ever wrote and finished, but it's fine.
But you finished.
I did.
And that makes it a good project.
Yes, I'm grateful for having got through that. And then I write another book I finished that in 2019, which I, tried to get published and it didn't work out, unfortunately, but it, really, it was nice to finish a book. I think that book rules. But I won't ever put it out there, but I think it's a good book. And then I started writing another book the book that became Detente in 2022. Finished that at the end of 2022. My agent at the time gave me the opportunity to revise it. Now I don't work with that agent, but I still wanted to get it out there. So that's my fiction writing journey, I think.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by Tumblstrum's Tome of Unicorns. This new book by Lucas Anderson offers 10 brand new unicorns and unicorn-themed stat blocks for 5th edition, including the Goopy Oozicorn, the Primeval Unicorn, and the Unicorn of Majesty. Each is accompanied with lore and plot hooks to inspire GMs using them for their campaign. There's also a section of unique magic items like the Bow of Fecundity. That's fun to say. Plus, all that is set to super evocative rock and roll zine art. Tumblstrum's Tome of Unicorns is a very flavorful and easy-to-use supplement and can be found right now on the Dungeon Masters Guild. That's TUMBLESTRUM''S Tome of Unicorns, available now on the Dungeon Masters Guild.
Hey everyone, Jonathan here with the Midroll. If you're looking for the hottest frog memes around, join the Reckless Attack community on Discord. You can find a link to it in the show notes of our latest episodes or on our website, recklessattack.com. Want to support the show? Tell a friend or check out our Patreon at patreon.com/recklessattack, where you can get access to our behind-the-screen talkback show, as well as our new Reckless to Snack series, where we eat snacks, hang out, and just talk about whatever's on our mind. Thanks so much for listening to us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
you had already been writing, you'd done your novella. It sounds like it sounds like finished your other book, your first book, by the time you started getting into tabletop role-playing game consumption outside of Dungeons and Dragons. So what was the experience like sitting down to design something for people to really interact with, as opposed to like consume, I guess, if that, kind of makes sense, of like a book, people are engaging with it, but it is what it is. And, you're in control of all the characters and the actions and all that stuff, versus tabletop games. Theoretically, here's some rules for you to tell your own other thing, which is very, very different. So was that an adjustment for you, or was that just kind of a natural different thing?
Oh, it was way easier to make a game than a book. You recently had Spencer Campbell on, and Spencer Campbell, has a philosophy in his design, which is like to intentionally leave gaps in his designs, because, he believes that, your table will know better how to fill in those gaps than he will. And, that's a philosophy I agree with. I think he's right. Sometimes, not everything needs rules. The rules are helpful and useful, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's just smart to be like, I don't care about that, but your table probably will be able to get it based on the vibes of what I'm trying to put out there. And that's, I took that philosophy into Detente when I was like, I have the story of Detente written out, but here's just all the toys from it. Like, here's the big monsters. Here's the bioengineer, the weirdo scientists. Here's the weird religion. Here's the big, pikemen in their black armor. Here's all the toys, and you kind of figure out what to do with it.
Yeah.
It took me, I would say, 6 months to write the Detente for the Ravenous game. It took me 2 years to write the novel. Much love to game designers, but writing a novel that works is, in my opinion, way, way harder than being a game designer, because at the end of the day, it's just the text. And, you can engage with the tabletop game in a whole lot of ways, but there's only one way to really engage with the novel.
Yes, right. That totally makes sense. Are there other games that kind of come out after that, first of all?
Yep. I make an expansion to Craft a King, Craft a Kingdom in May of 2021. And I make that one a little bit more polished. That's when I really start getting engaged with the indie scene. Around that time, I, connect with Titanomachy RPG, or Lex Barbaro, who will eventually release the Caltrop core.
Indeed.
And as far as I know, I released the first Caltrop core game.
I was going to say, I specifically remember that.
Yeah, thank you.
That was one of the first times I had seen you. Yes. Was like Lex being like, hey, someone made a Caltrop core thing. And it was just you, because you designed it in like an hour after it got released or something preposterous like that.
It was like a week. I just sat down and I was like, this seems like it's going to be big. I should probably make a game for it. And that one is I Adjure You, Ancient Serpent. And that is an exorcism game. It was October of 2021. But yeah, that's also, I remember seeing the Reckless Talk podcast account for the first time and being like, oh, okay, I should follow these folks. That's kind of the design trajectory I go on. And then did I also make Time Skip in 2021? What was I doing? Yeah. 2021, man, weird year.
When you said that you were, that you find designing tabletop role-playing games easier than writing a book, you backed it up in the year 2021.
Yeah, no, I certainly haven't made that many games since. I don't know.
Because I had looked at your itch page and it was like, okay, cool. Like some of these are coming out here and there and blah, blah, blah. But I wasn't sure exactly what the order or frequency of them were. But yeah, boy, you really churned out quite a few in that first year or so, huh?
Yeah. That's weird. Yeah. Anyway, but I bring up Titanomachy because Lex had the Caltrop core jam basically that year.
Yeah.
I released a relatively bad game for that jam, but Nick Torville, designer of Hometown Holiday, released a game called Gorsh Quest. Have you ever seen Gorsh Quest?
No, I've seen Hometown Holiday. I had not seen Gorsh Quest. I will be after this.
Yeah, Hometown Holiday is great. It's one of my favorite like Hallmark-based RPGs. I had the pleasure of playing it with Nick last year. It was awesome. But Nick also made Gorsh Quest, which is based off of a
wait, I remember now.
Yeah, have you seen this Disney short?
Please, I am not. This is your time and space, not mine. Please tell the people about it. But I just, in case I start chuckling to myself, I want to explain to the listener that it was because I remembered what Garsh Quest was.
Okay, I am gonna pull up the page just to remember the actual name of the.
Reasonable.
Where is it? Oh, I think it's probably like blacklisted on YouTube now.
No one can know.
Disney, Goofy, Vor, short.
I am absolutely leaving in you under your breath saying that phrase into the podcast. I'm sorry to inform you.
Yep, that's fine. Okay, so this is it's on the Mickey Mouse YouTube channel. It's called Third Wheel. And it shows Mickey and Minnie having a little date, but Goofy keeps interrupting them. And like Mickey gets really mad at Goofy at the end, and Goofy is like, "Oh, well, why didn't you say you wanted some privacy?" And he unhinges his jaw and swallows Mickey and Minnie whole. And then they have a date in his belly, and it's deranged.
Very normal, very reasonable. Yep, absolutely.
But Nick, a genius, makes a Calchop Core game based on that. And as far as I know, right now, as of right now, I'm the only person who's left a comment / review on Garsh Quest, and that is technically my first RPG review.
I see that. Yes.
And
you left that's a sizable review as well. It's like multiple paragraphs long.
Yeah, because like I was like, oh, this is getting me to engage with the game in a way that at that time I was like, this will make me a better designer. But like breaking down that game, seeing how its mechanics worked, I wanted to start doing that to be like, oh, reading more will get me to be smarter, will help me be a better designer. So from there in 2022, I'm just like, well, what if, we're also hungry for, opportunities to, one, have people look at our games, and two, have tools to promote our games.
Yeah.
What if I started a YouTube channel? And
hey, you're talking to a podcaster who started our channel in 2021 too, so like
yeah,
you will find no judgment here, only mutual understanding.
Listen, we're both podcasters. I'm a YouTuber. Like, we're not cool.
No, we know who we are.
But we're out here, and we're doing the work, so that's something. But like that's kind of what it started as, is like an opportunity for me to both help boost the little itch games, and talk about things that I found interesting, and help me understand games as well. And then it just started getting bigger, and I realized I kind of liked doing this more than game design. I just think it is one way to like help build up a designer's profile, just to be like, hey, somebody's doing something really cool, I want to shout them out.
Yeah,
that's kind of how I got into reviewing. And then at a certain point, they start taking a turn because reviewing is also a little bit boring. Have you? I know you're a journalist. Have you written many game reviews though?
No, I haven't. I feel very underqualified to talk about games in that way, and letting people know my opinion about things is so scary half the time that like that feels very intimidating.
Fair enough. There's a part of game reviewing where it's just like you're telling the audience what the mechanics are, and that's not unimportant, but it is a little boring. It kind of got rote, which is why I started pivoting to a more video essay style format, because I thought that was a little bit more interesting. Yeah,
definitely, and that's certainly where I got the most exposure to you, was in the video essay portion of the things you're doing, as opposed to the just kind of straight reviews, which are also still great. But to take the step back for a second, video essay and or kind of like YouTube reviews, etc., like having a video channel, I guess, to do those sort of things, was that a style of communication that you already had some amount of affection for? Was that something you were already consuming and kind of taking in, or was that just an avenue for a thing you wanted to do?
I mean, I think I've been using YouTube as long as YouTube has been around, basically. I'm of that generation. So it's not like I didn't, see YouTube essays before. Both Jacob Geller and Mike Rugnetta were recently on. Jacob Geller has a podcast. So, thinking about those people as big influences on me as like, thinkers and writers. But like, the video essay as a format, like I didn't really, consider actively when I first started. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely, all sorts of really brilliant games people that were making YouTube stuff at the time, that I just try to, steal as much as I can from.
Yep. As any good creator does, obviously. So you already talked a little bit about how one of the big motivators for starting in that space was to shine a spotlight on fellow small, itch games and that sort of thing. And I think from my recollection of mainlining a bunch of your videos over the last week, in addition to consuming them well before that, was that you have really pretty much stuck to that formula. There aren't a lot of, yes, this, is this the D&D killer type videos, or is like, Pathfinder 2e is coming out with this blah, blah, blah. Like, it is truly very indie products and projects that you are really shining your spotlight on for the most part.
To be clear, I did review Spencer Campbell's Slayers, which he advertised as a D&D killer. So technically,
that's different. That's different. Yeah. He can call it that.
Right.
The Spencer Campbell games are still extremely indie, and I think Spencer would certainly be the first person to tell you that. Yeah. But is that something that you kind of found particularly interesting, or was that just kind of a niche that you kind of like not fell into but chose and have run with since?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely the second. It truly came out of a desire to help boost the indie community, because like Nathan, do you design games?
I have half designed 2 to 3 games.
Okay. Did you put them on itch?
I know I haven't finished any of them yet.
Okay. So I'm on the itch.io page for Lancer right now.
Mm-hmm.
And Lancer, as of today, has 654 ratings on itch.io, which for maybe the most popular game on itch.io is so small.
Yes.
Right. Like, and that's, that's Lancer, right? That's like as close to mainstream as indie RPGs get.
Right. And especially on itch, it has been, I think, top 2 or 3 in downloads since it launched.
Yes.
Consistently, all that stuff. Yeah, big time.
Right. So for people who, like us, who are certainly compared to D&D, but even, big names like people who have been in the scene for forever, right? 600 ratings, 600 downloads would be huge. It would be a field day, right? And that's why I think that doing projects that promote smaller games is so important, because like that's where one, it means so much to us when we get, like a couple comments, like when you like I think Detente for the Ravenous has like maybe 30 downloads right now, which like is, that is the goal I was aiming for, right? I'm very pleased with that result. But like it's not a huge number, right? And you just have such a greater impact when you are doing stuff at a smaller scale. That I just, I hope that folks internalize that, like, when you put one comment on somebody who has 0 comments, right, you have infinitely increased the amount of comments they have.
Yep.
We are working with numbers that are so small in our scene that like it matters so much, and your impact is so much greater for creators who are, relatively small. So that's I think I'm a little bit rambling, but that's kind of the hope, is that, occasionally I'll do a game that's like quote unquote big, like Wonder Home, right? Or Dialect. But that's all in service of, bringing it back to people who have like small, weird projects, because that's where innovation happens, is in the weirdest, smallest places on itch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of set the scene for the larger discussions around your video essays, where does the kind of like, what does the process look like? Do you start kind of with a game? Do you start, do you have a list of games that you're looking to get to? Are you looking at subjects and themes to start to pull in? Because something that I've always really, really enjoyed about your video essays is not just how thoughtful you are in looking at the game itself and kind of the mechanics, certainly still, and the themes that it does, but also kind of bringing in this bigger tapestry of media and, if not influence, then at least kind of adjacent storytelling that enriches the game you're talking about. And all that is to say is that your videos, while they are usually, I think, 15 to 20 minutes or less, if not 5 to 10 minutes, are all very thick with a lot of theme, a lot of perspective, a lot of that sort of thing that certainly belies that you have thought and worked through them a lot. So yeah, what does it look like for you? And kind of where do you start beyond I have YouTube channel, I have game smashed together?
I mean, to be honest, it's not that much more than the second thing you said.
Yeah.
So it really is just like I pick a game that I want to cover. If I don't know much about it, I'll read it. And a lot of the time, I can't get an angle on it. I think that's probably the hardest thing that I've had to deal with since switching the format, is just being like, I can talk about any game that, in a review fashion, because you can just describe what the mechanics are doing. Yeah. But to get into a more like deep, like thematic or historical context, that is harder to do. Like there occasionally people will ask me to cover their work, and I just can't, because I'm like, I can't find an angle for this. And it's not that you've made a bad game or that I don't like your game, but like I just don't have anything to say about it. Yeah. So I have to, dig to find an angle first. And from there, I will try to draw out themes. Like with Morkborg, I covered at the beginning of the year. I initially didn't have a whole lot to say about Morkborg because the OSR games are very bare bones mechanically. Yep. But then I listened to Dan Phipps on the Dice Exploder podcast. I think Dan and Kaylee are both on there, talking about how Morkborg is, Dan's favorite comedy game, and being like, that's an interesting way to look at that. And then like reading about what other people wrote about Morkborg, getting their ideas, and then being like, okay, Morkborg hates you. That makes sense. And going from there, I try to write out a thesis at the top of my video script and be like, okay, here's what I think I want to aim for. I would say about 60% of the time I get there. Sometimes it kind of goes off. But yeah, it is trying to pick interesting angles and opinions out of them, and trying to, find something, find a take that I think both resonates with the work, but is also more broadly applicable than just what's in the text. Yeah, absolutely. So are you someone who is already first naturally curious about different games? It certainly seems that way, but do you enjoy doing it just for like your free time, or is it exclusively fueled by research, either for your own work, for your videos, for whatever else? Or where are you on that spectrum, if that even is a spectrum? Am I naturally curious? I would say I'm less curious and more just like at all times aware of the tiny infinitesimal span of my life and my ability to like experience the world. Every time I try to research something, I'm just like, I don't know shit about anything. Even the RPG scene, right? I've been in the scene for 3 years. This scene is 50 years old. This scene dates back to 19th century Prussia, if you want to go back to Kriegspiel. Yep. This and even before then, you could probably make more comparisons to games or plays, tabletop stuff. Like I'm sure that stuff exists beyond the context of Kriegspiel, but like, so there's just so very much to learn, to quote Kingdom Hearts. I think that answers the curious bit. I want to know as much as I can. But do I enjoy making videos? No, I hate video editing with every fiber of my being. I occasionally introduce myself as a wretched YouTuber. That's because I think YouTube is a bad platform and I think it sucks to be a YouTuber. But, I am grateful for having a platform so I can actually, spotlight indie games. But as for the actual process of it, of writing, and analyzing games, that is the most important thing to me is to be able to read people's work and highlight passion projects, right? This is where the most interesting stuff in game design is happening. So I think that answered the question. I hate making videos, but I love writing videos and, trying to uplift creators. And I will grit my teeth and use YouTube until it is no longer a viable platform, I suppose. Yep. Reasonable. Something that I've always really found both admirable and interesting
about reviewers and about people who have video essays is kind of a play on that. Is the amount of kind of thought that gets put in, the amount of consumption, and I mean that in a positive way, not in the capitalism sort of way. And the amount of just kind of fearlessness that kind of goes in, at least from my perspective, of saying, hey, I have an opinion about this, or I have noticed these things about this game, about this whatever, and I think this game is good, and I think these ideas are interesting and good, and let me tell you about them. Does that come naturally to you? Is that something where it's like, yeah, no, I like this thing and I'm going to talk about it and talk about how anamnesis has to do with Kingdom Hearts in these sorts of ways and of like all these sorts of things? Or is that something that you have kind of ramped up to as you've kind of gotten more into making more personal video essays?
I think that the nature of the scene being small and everybody being hungry for promotion has really, given me confidence to talk about my thoughts and opinions. I don't think that I am naturally a very confident person, right? I think I definitely have to work up and work over that imposter syndrome. But yeah, I mean, I think as far as like getting my ideas out there, like I don't think I'm a uniquely, bright or talented person. I have the luxury of the time to research stuff and find other people's ideas. That's one of the things about the video essay format is that most of the ideas in there aren't mine. They're either ideas that are present in the text that I am bringing out, or they are ideas that I researched that I am saying. Some of that is, I think I'm proud of the work that I do, but I wouldn't, attribute that uniquely to me.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Is there a point where you have a good video, or at least a good video for you, whether or not like getting metrics out of it, getting, anything of that, where you're like, oh, I have figured out my perspective on this, or, like you said, I have something to say and I'm excited about this thing that I have to say. Like, is there a kind of internal switch or gauge for when you're like, ooh, I think this is going to be a good one?
I'm sure you feel something similar when you are done with an interview and you're like, oh, this was great. Or, you finish a piece and you're like, oh, I think I've got it. It varies, right? Sometimes you're just like, this is the work. Very rarely will I think bringing up the metrics thing is such a good point because currently I think my best performing video is the Merkborg video, which I think is like fine. I think I'm happy with it. I don't know why it's my best video. That's why I hate YouTube. Because I think, this year, at least one of the best videos I've done was, Spy in the House of Eth by, ZXU. Cause that one I was like, oh, this is a good piece. And, because YouTube didn't like it and very few people watched it. So very strange, but yeah, I don't know. I think occasionally I'll be like, I'm on one. Like, I think my Spire essay is one of the best things I've ever done. Half the time I'm just kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping the themes stick and then it resonates with someone.
Something that you do a really great job of is hitting on those themes, even if they are, very obvious in the text of the game that you're working on or the media that you're kind of pulling from. But something that I think I have really appreciated about your videos is tabletop role-playing games, very experiential. There are, like you said, there are rules, and you can definitely just list off the rules and say, yep, these are good rules, review over. And that be, technically valid. But also, tabletop role-playing games are very experiential. And your videos always seem to, or at least very frequently, pull in a lot of your experiences, not necessarily with the game, not necessarily even from your life, though sometimes, but sometimes with, hey, this video game I played, this movie, this bit of research, this thing from real life, this whatever. And there is a lot of extra layer to it. And so I was curious around, is that something that you're consciously aiming for when you're making your scripts for these? Or is it something, I know you've kind of talked about, kind of pivoting into that more personal essay vibe, but is that like a requirement for you of like when you're doing a video?
The easy answer is like, well, it's easier to write about my life because I know that.
Yeah.
I don't have to like do a whole lot of research in that. that is one reason why it feels like my personal stuff is bleeding into my videos. Like, it's just, I already have that knowledge. I guess secondly, tabletop games are a very subjective experience, and that's my own subjectivity is coming in through there. But if I can compare it to a video game that's popular, or an experience that I think other people can relate to, that kind of helps broaden that subjectivity and help people connect to that. But I think a much smarter person than me, Thomas Manuel, recently posted on Blue Sky, RPG reviews are based on reading are an act of imagination. RPG reviews based on playing are an act of introspection. And I think that really comes down to like what that is just like, you're either doing imagination or introspection. And for me, I guess writing essays is kind of both.
Do you try to play the games that you are talking about, or are you mostly reading, reflecting, and like you said, imagining?
Very rarely do I play a game. Sometimes if it's a solo game, I'll take a crack at it. But I just, it's hard enough to get people together to play a game.
Definitely.
I think that, every game, even with the same rules, you're going to have pretty different experiences depending on the people you play with and the kind of stories you're trying to tell.
Definitely.
Not that I'm saying that, playing a game before you review it is not valuable. I think it's almost certainly very valuable. But I just, I spend most of my time reading.
That's really interesting. And, I'm also kind of glad you brought that up as a subject, because I know that's been a discussion point, I guess, in TTRPG review as of late, of like some, there are hardline people who are like, no, you have to play the game before you have any opinions, or people, on the other side of the fence were like, well, no, I can imagine what it feels like and how it works. And that's enough. So do you feel secure in your, I guess, your your perspective on things as a reader and imaginer of games? Or is that something you're like, I'm doing what I can?
Yeah, I feel very secure. Like, listen, Nathan, you and I both spend a lot of time thinking about tabletop role-playing games, reading them, playing them. I love tabletop role-playing games. If I ever got mad about the way that somebody talked about tabletop role-playing games because they didn't play it first, I think that I should probably just get a different hobby. Like, I think there are truly people out there that care about RPGs too much, and like, passion is good. It is important to care about things deeply, but like, I think that there's a part of me that is able to do this because I just don't care that much. I will very rarely get angry about opinions I see about tabletop games, because like,
What a superpower.
They're games, y'all. I love them, but they are games. The only time I get mad is when people use their game opinions to go after other people, and then I get very upset. But
yeah, very reasonable. So when you're making yours, and this is in the context of YouTube being a giant platform filled with every single bit of humanity and probably plenty of inhumanity, how much do you assume your audience knows about tabletop role-playing games, mechanics, that sort of thing in your videos? You certainly don't, kind of like start with the cliche, like, tabletop role-playing games are when a group of people sit down to use rules to have imagination. You do talk about rules, and you reference other games, sometimes games that you have made a video of, sometimes just games that exist and are touchstones. So what's the audience you're writing for, I guess, if you have one in mind?
Yeah, my imaginary audience is the indie tabletop scene. So in my earlier reviews, I would explain what the PBTA, mixed success table looked like. I don't do that anymore. I kind of assume that anybody who is watching my videos knows what PBTA is. Like, I truly am, speaking to a narrow audience. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how effective that is. I try not to, worry too much about what my quote unquote audience thinks. I try to care more about what my friends in the RPG scene think.
Yeah, I mean, again, having an audience in mind, that's the vibe, right? You want your group of sickos, and that's the hope.
Yes.
Has making these video essays and viewing tabletop games through that lens, Has that changed how you look at tabletop games, how you look at media, at all that sort of thing? Like, has it shifted your perspective, or is it just an expression of something that was kind of already there for you?
I mean, I think, yeah, if you put enough amount of time into anything, it'll kind of change the way that you engage with it. You know, when I read games now, I am thinking about how I could take those ideas and put them into a video, or at least,
Yep.
Create something out of that. I mean, the more that I make these videos, and the more that I hope that they help other people reach new audiences and learn more about the breadth that indie tabletop games is, are able to reach. It makes me want to learn more about the medium, and I don't think I necessarily read games differently besides being able to pull video material out of them. But I do think about another thing that I didn't mention in bringing up, my start into the essays, is that Professor Cameron Kunzelman once posted on Twitter that he got this piece of advice in grad school that his professor told him to read one work or one piece, one article of something in his field every day, and that's how you become well read in it. And that's another reason why I make these things, these videos, so I can force myself to read and become well versed in the scene. And I think that's been a mixed success as far as I've read a lot more tabletop games now, but I still haven't read Apocalypse World. I've read a dozen PBTA games, but not Apocalypse World. So in that way, I think it just it goes back to what I said earlier about being so aware of what I don't know. It's just the more that I do these videos, the more I realize there's just so much left to learn.
And that kind of brings me to the next question that I think applies both to video essays and to your more recent work that is really steeped in a lot of very intense and very often historical, or at least has the echoes of real life history in it. How do you know when enough is enough? Being someone who's aware of how little you do or do not know. When you're putting stuff out there, when you are building a YouTube channel or building a video that is tied to someone's work that they put a lot of thought and passion, hopefully, into, all the way to you're writing your book, and it is calling on all these interesting themes and interesting histories and all that stuff, that could be very overwhelming and intimidating. Certainly it has been for me in the past. So is there a point for you when you're that's enough? I know I have thought about this, or I've read enough about this to feel pretty confident? Or is it just I have to finish this chapter today, and so I guess I have learned enough?
Definitely the second one. I mean, a couple months ago, I put out a video that was comparing Kevin Tianvilla-Wynn's Before the Boats and They Took Our War, and that involved a lot of research into the American intervention in Vietnam in the 60s and 70s. And I absolutely do not know enough about that. That was an incredibly, wide ranging and important historical conflict. I think part of it is just knowing you're never going to know enough.
Mm-hmm.
And if you try to become perfect, you are never going to get anything out there. And I think the best thing to do is to cite your sources and, admit that you don't know everything, and limit the scope of what you're working on. Sometimes I'll just be okay, I can't do more about this. I could, but I got to get this done. So
are you someone who's good at doing the work? Just sitting down and being yep, my goal was to write 1,000 words today, and I did it.
I think when I am in the zone, I am able to do the work. My word limit is 500. I usually don't do more than 500 per day. And I usually don't do it constantly. But when I'm drafting a novel, I will usually try to get 3,000 words a week, or, 500 words a day, and then, take one day off at the end of the week. But yeah, when I am on my self-imposed deadlines, I'm usually pretty good about being okay, I need to knock this out. Sometimes I don't, but I usually at least commit an hour to writing a day. very rarely do I get into a mode where it's like, oh, I got this. I got to go. I got to get the words out. It's truly just like, well, I'm going to do this now.
That's amazing. And again, is that something that you have had to work on? Or do you have any, I guess, advice for kind of getting into that level of discipline and of forward movement?
Yeah, I mean, like, it is absolutely something I have to work on and continue to work on. When I first started writing my like first full book, I was aiming for like 200 words a day. That's what I did for a long time. And then I decided I needed to get the book done. So I switched to like 400 words a day. And that was enough to get it done. And now I've built up that tolerance over years. So I can usually get to about 500, but it's not easy. And I started low. And even today, I still have to use Forest to make sure that I don't go on my phone, and I have it on my browser, so I don't go browsing on Blue Sky or Tumblr. So yeah, that's my only advice is like, give yourself a Pomodoro, like 25, 30-minute burst, take a break, come back. And that's, you can usually get a lot of work done in that time.
Oh, I've been doing a lot of productivity streaming on our Twitch channel recently, and it's been a lot of Pomodoros and like, ooh, it really hits my brain. Oh, so nice. I think it's now finally time to talk about Detente for the Ravenous, which again is a new both book and tabletop role-playing game. And I read through the entire game. I've read through a good hunk of the book. And first of all, they're both very fun and very good. And I have a lot of things to talk about with them. It sounds like you said that you came up with it started as a book, correct? Back in, I think you said 2022 is when you started kind of plunking away on it.
Yes, yeah, that's when I first started the book. What is the majority of the current draft that you read, was done by the end of 2023. The game is truly secondary. It's a marketing scheme to get people to read the book.
But it is you say that, but it is the game, like, it's not just like a 5-pager like Word doc, like you said. There's like a lot. It's like dozens of pages for something that's just a marketing ploy. Yeah. You did like a lot of work on it.
I truly did not intend it to be that long. I wanted it to be shorter, but I was just like, I got to do the Spire thing and put a lot of lore in there. So there's a lot of lore in there.
There is, but for something that has a whole book to it, there is not nearly as much lore as there could have been. But and we'll get to that. So first, can you just tell people both the kind of role-playing game / kind of world that it inhabits and the book are about? Set the scene, because it is a very, very specific, very flavorful, very wild in a good way setting.
Yeah, so the book, the short pitch is a group of revolutionary assassins travel to fantasy Rome / Vatican City / America to assassinate Pope Henry Kissinger after he did a kaiju coup on their hometown. That's the short pitch of the book. It draws on a lot of Cold War influences, obviously, but also like historical touchstones from the 30 Years War, as well as the like Russia stand-in also has a lot of Parthian influences. So like the Rome-Parthian wars. So that's kind of the like aesthetic historical mode I'm working in. But there's also like big monsters that are based on sins, which I think are fun. So that's the kind of fantasy world we're working with. And because it is more of like a spy / assassin, thriller, it works really well with the resistance system. That's the Grant Howard, Chris Taylor, Spire and Heart system. I'd also, just done 2 big videos on those when I, was thinking about designing the game. And I was like, oh, the resistance system works really well for this kind of story where it's like there can be a lot of weird, bad things that happen to your characters, but also they are fighting like this, revolutionary violent struggle.
Something that really stood out to me about both was the level of detail and the amount of themes that are just like immediately thrown in the face of the readers and players of both. You don't say literal Pope Henry Kissinger on page 1 of either, but like you could have.
Yeah.
And, maybe you could have written like Pope Henry Hissinger or whatever, and it would have been like, oh yeah, okay, that fits in. So take me back to when you were sitting down to start the book and start the process that would eventually include the tabletop role-playing game. What were the initial grains of thought behind it?
It really just stems from, I had heard for a long time that Henry Kissinger was like a monster. So I, wanted to learn about that. And also, I like history. I like studying history. A lot of my, fiction has historical influences in it because I think that history is neat. So like, it started with me reading the book by Audrey and George Cahan, Subversion as Foreign Policy, which is like about the first time the United States tried to influence the government of Indonesia. That was my first book that I started researching and learning about the weird ways that American foreign policy, was tied to both the ideological struggle between, I guess, capitalism and communism, but like it started there. And, I kept researching and, reading lots more books that continued to give me some context about why America did what it did to many, what they called, third world nations at the time. And then just like I grew up Catholic, I went to Catholic high school. I was very into Catholicism for a while until I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is like my eternal curse is trying to figure out like why I find Catholicism so compelling, why I truly loved that religion for a while, but also found it monstrous at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It all comes back to history, right? Like I'm a biracial person. My mom is, for all intents and purposes, Indian. When she met my dad, she was already Catholic, which begs the question, why was somebody with Indian origins, a Catholic person? There's a lot of history behind that, and not much of it is good. And that's kind of why why Catholicism shows up a lot in my work, because like I think Catholicism is like a kind of incredible religion. I think there is so much beauty in its works of art and its sculptures and its rituals, and also it's a religion where you eat God and drink his blood.
Indeed.
And yeah, I'm just trying to combine that with the way that Catholicism can make people into monsters, right? That's why I'm not Catholic anymore. A large part is just because the Catholic Church doesn't accept gay people or trans people, in both the ways that it turns other people into monsters, and also it makes you into a monster for the way that you treat them, which ties very neatly into the ways that by virtue of being an American, I'm a monster.
Yeah.
Because of the way my tax dollars are spent.
Have you found in the process of making these books and, just kind of generally researching these sorts of topics, because again, I know, like you said, that's been a theme throughout, the podcast that you made and a bunch of other stuff. Has the process of you researching and recontextualizing through fiction been helpful for you, in processing, in at least kind of coming to grips with it? Or what has or has not it done for you?
I mean, I think it's certainly influenced the way I specifically view American Christianity. Like Catholicism is my personal touchstone, but a lot of the like extremist that mandate to evangelize the world comes from Protestantism and Baptists in the United States, and specifically the ways in which those movements are tied into like white supremacy, in the ways that like those projects are both about colonizing and spreading the word of a particular religion in service of political ends. So yeah, like definitely when you when you watch God's Not Dead and they hit an atheist with a car and then they're like, something beautiful has happened here tonight. It makes you think about the ways in which Christianity makes you kind of a freak if you're really, really into it.
So, we've talked a little bit about the engine to a degree, and about the setting of both the book and the game are both small groups kind of pushing against this oppressive foreign government / religion / all the slashes possible, all the isms, all of the ogs, the whatevers. Is that a particular dynamic in fiction that you enjoy? Kind of small group against huge semi-insurmountable odds, kind of going back to that apocalyptic stakes? Or is that just kind of like, well, I want to write about Henry Kissinger and the Catholic Church, and you kind of can't not have that be a huge big thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely the second one, right? I think it's just easier to write a story from one person's point of view, and that necessarily involves a small number of people. I mean, I'm sure somebody has done a book where it's a single point of view where they meet a ton of people, but like for me, it was very clear like this is a heist story where the heist at the end is that you kill the Pope.
You are heisting the life of said individual,
of Henry Kissinger. Yeah. I think those stories are interesting, certainly, and I think it is a useful tool to be able to deploy as a writer, to be like, here's a small group of people that your audience can connect to and relate to. But I mean, like, I like history. I like seeing things from that like big perspective. I hope that one day I'm able to write something that does have like large scale consequences that deal with a lot of people. But, you know, I think many stories are about a small group of people just because of the necessity of the structure.
The setting of this, I know you gave the elevator pitch already, but it is super on the face mishmashy. And you call it out very specifically in the tabletop game, but is very apparent even on the first handful of pages in the book. It is a little bit US/Rome/India. I think you talk about like there is 1998 internet, but also people are firing muskets, and and also there's these creatures that are horrific semi-kaiju made of sin that walk the earth and were used as a bioweapon. It is on its face very intentionally familiar and anachronistic. I think it would be very easy to be like, oh yeah, and this is set with normal stuff, Sure. Like it is today's thing, or it is super fantasy. And also there's wizards and there happens to be all of these walking abominations or whatever. But yeah. How did you sit down and figure out A, what the world was, but B, where all of the puzzle pieces fit together of the mix of cultures, of centuries, of reality to kind of fit what you wanted it to be, and why?
Yeah, I mean, I think I started with like trying to emulate, again, the Greenbone saga and being like, because that's also like Cold War technology. So like, the internet doesn't start showing up until very, very late in those series. So I wanted to kind of do that. I also thought it would be very funny to be like, what if this was like the mid 2000s era, but also the 17th century Baroque period? So like There are people in this setting that like have like the ruffled collars, but also they wear like crop tops and like thigh-high boots and
yes,
like that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Perfect.
So like a lot of that was just like starting from the aesthetic touchstones that I think are fun. A lot of the art from the 30 Years War is like very striking, right? When you see all these like big pike formations, I think that's a very interesting silhouette. Starting from there, and then like a lot of it was truly just being like, I'm going to incorporate stuff that is interesting to the story, and then work backwards. Like a lot of the history of the setting was not super well sketched out until I started the tabletop game. That timeline I had, but like it was kind of fuzzy, and you can kind of piece that together in the book. But then I wrote it back into the tabletop game and then codified it and then used that to kind of recodify the book. So yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the advantages of designing this at the same time as releasing the book, is that I could kind of have both of the texts influence each other.
Did you find that process helpful? To have kind of these multiple brains going at once of like, oh well, my work over here on the tabletop game makes me think of things differently here, and vice versa? Or were they just kind of, again, two pieces of the same puzzle?
I just thought it was nice to be able to take all the stuff that I had written that didn't get to go in the book and then kind of put it in somewhere and be like, okay, I had this headcanon that like you can maybe see in the book. Like there's like hints at the God and Dominion and like its politics and structure, but like you never really see it beyond like Operative K, who is in the book, but he's also the like fictional narrator of the game, the designer of the game. But like actually seeing the history of that country, like I didn't really have any of that sketched out until I started designing the game. So like I do like the opportunity that the game gave me to codify those pieces and be like, okay, now this is real. It was only kind of hinted at before, but now it's real, which is fun.
Yeah, absolutely. This is maybe an unfair question to ask, but sitting down to both write a book and a game about resistance in a climate that is oppressive, is hateful, is at least rejectful of kind of air quotes foreign ways of life or of thinking of that sort of thing. Now that it is done, your great work is done. What do you hope that people get, or what was your message maybe about the fight against that sort of a system, or about living in that system, or living opposed to that system? Again, knowing the sources of real worldness that you were pulling from that certainly are very reflective of where we are today.
I don't know that I, had a unified take away, right?
Yeah, like a thesis.
Right. I think that everyone who reads a work is going to come away with a slightly different interpretation. And in some ways, that's what enables me to do my, YouTube channel is the ability to have different reads on the same text. I mean, I think that if you read Ravenous and it makes you feel angry or weird or distressed, I think those are all valid feelings to come out of that, because Ravenous is a world that is based on the hegemonies of the past and the present. I think is a tough thing to wrangle with the shape of empire and its vast scope and power. But I also hope that people come away from these texts and think that there are things that can be done about it. There are ways in which, yes, we are complicit, either by our actions or our beliefs or our tax dollars. But I also hope that people will think that there are also ways in which we can mitigate the damage that we do. There are ways in which we can refuse to be inculcated by these systems. And I hope that we never stop pushing for something better, even if it does not happen in our lifetimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very much feels captured from what I have read, and certainly from the game that I've looked at. So the last kind of question I think I had about it, and I could just keep asking a zillion of them, I think, for both the game and the book. But what is your, knowing you've kind of self-classified the TTRPG, which again is still 80 or 90 or something preposterous pages, quote unquote, only in a marketing ploy. What would your optimal experience or optimal suggestion be for, other than step one, buy both of these things on itch.io / go to Aaron's website? Is there a not even an order that's too prescriptive or whatever, but they have these two things to interact with? I guess, have you imagined how people might interact with both of these things, hypothetically, or one or both?
I genuinely do not know if anyone will ever play the RPG. I never, had that thought in mind while I was designing it. And in some ways you can tell.
Again, it's 80 pages. I think you're underselling it at least a little bit.
Sure, but there are parts of the rules that I think that when people actually play will be like, oh, this doesn't work, because I thought it was a coin flip as to whether or not anybody would actually get this to the table. I think that if I were to encourage people to engage with these texts, if you're a person who likes to read, I would say read the book first, because the book is the thing I care about the most. But if you're a tabletop player, go through the classes, I think is the best way to be like, oh, okay, what does bioengineer mean? What does communer mean? Go through the critical advances and find the grossest, weirdest one, and be like, oh, I want to get there, and then work your way backwards until you can scuttle together adventure or a mission, I guess is the text's term. And if that doesn't work, go to the tactical dossier and flip through some of the pictures there. And if you find a weird, gross monster description that you're like, oh, I want to fight one of those, or at least contend with one of those. I don't know how many of those can be killed, but if that is appealing to you, then go there and then work your way backwards from there.
Aaron, I don't want to speak for you. I've had a very great time here today on Reckless to Talk. Learning about your processes, about your mindsets, about the way you're responding to art is all really good. And I think stuff that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. And it's been really great just to get to chat with you. And I wanted to say all that before what is about to happen to you happens to you. And I'm really sorry in advance.
Okay.
For you and for any new listeners who are not familiar with Reckless to Talk, we've come to the end-ish of the show, which means we've come to the fabled Reckless to Talk lightning round. Now, this gauntlet is a series of questions. It is the same questions we ask to everyone who is on our show in the exact same order every single time. There are no wrong answers other than lying, just because that's kind of lame. It can be short, to the point. It can be long. Oh, that reminds me of a time where blah, blah, blah. You could thoughtfully pause, stroke your chin and say, I don't have a good answer for that. No matter what, we'll look at you. I will nod sagely and we'll move on to the next question. I don't think I have anything else. No words of comfort, no salve to offer you, only an extension of a hand inviting you towards challenge. Aaron, are you ready for the Reckless to Talk lightning round?
Let's do it.
Question 1. Is your glass half full or half empty?
All full, baby.
What excites you creatively, spiritually, and or emotionally?
Big, weird swings, even if they're misses.
What does not excite you creatively, spiritually, and or emotionally?
Clout chasing, even though I'm guilty of it sometimes.
What is your favorite sound?
The purrs of my littlest cat when she climbs onto my chest.
What sound do you hate?
There's a sound that IV pumps make when they are jammed or empty that to this day just drives me up the wall.
What is your favorite word?
I think for the purposes of this interview, it's ostensibly, to quote the Tumblr user 9crimew, you can write some mean-ass sentences with it.
I appreciate citing sources in the Reckless to Talk lightning round. I'm not going to say it's going to deliver you to the other side, but it will get you some bonus points. What is your least favorite word?
Spice, but specifically in the context of romance literature TikTok.
What tabletop role-playing game, monster, antagonist, etc., you get what I mean, have you never faced or run that you would love to?
Weirdly, for somebody who made a game all about like mishmash monsters, I don't think I've run a chimera yet.
Ooh. What is your favorite adventure of all time? And this can be a tabletop role-playing game adventure that you read, that you wrote, that you ran, that you went through, that you watched someone else play, or it could be 1999's The Mummy, whatever the question means to you.
Oh, in that case, I think it is Fast and Furious 7.
I am contractually bound to offer no additional response. What is your favorite tabletop role-playing game character of all time? Similarly, it can be an NPC in one of your games, or an adventure, or an actual play, or whatever.
I think I played a divorced Minotaur dad in one of my friend's D&D campaigns, and I loved playing him and him trying to figure out his situation with his ex-wife who he's trying to get back with, and his teen daughter who is just like hopelessly like, come on, Dad, you got to pull it together.
Aaron, final question. What gives you hope?
The many, many younger people out there who are way smarter than me.
And with that, congratulations. You have made it through not just the Reckless to Talk lightning round, but Reckless to Talk itself. And as a reward, could you please remind everyone who you are, who you have been, how they can learn more about you and support you in all of the good ways?
Yeah. My name is Aaron Voigt. I'm on YouTube at AA Voigt. I'm on Itch.io at AaronSXL. And if you want to check out Detente for the Ravenous, that's at aaronsxl.itch.io/DFTRRPG.
And all of that, among many other things, will be all linked to in the show notes. Please go check it out. Aaron, thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Bye-bye.